How's it going, everybody? This is Aaron the Pedantic. I should have moved my microphone first. All right, you good, buddy? Yeah, that's good. So, today I wanted to talk about something. It just kind of popped in my head all of a sudden when I was doing some driving earlier. I was like, you know what? I had this one really good experience with Level 0 Adventures in 5th edition, and I've had a lot of really good ones in Dungeon Crawl Classics, so this is a great topic, I feel like. This is something that I think would bring a lot of joy to a lot of players who maybe don't know that they would enjoy this. Basically, the concept of a Level 0 adventure is usually you're going to have characters that have no particular major skills that they use. They're not heroes by any measure of imagination. They may or may not have some kind of backstory. I'm going to use that very lightly, but really the purpose of the Level 0 adventure is often to demonstrate lethality if you're playing DCC. But it's also in a way it's also fantastic for creating this shared like party history that makes it where once you hit level 1, you feel like you have this kind of experience together. And of course, depending on how lethal your game is after that point, it might be kind of like pointless in a way, because it's like, oh well, everybody from the original party died, so but at the same time, it's a great warm-up exercise, and it really gets people to just start playing, to just hit the road, just go like 0 to 60 as quick as possible, and then just to keep on going after that, keep the hits rolling. So I just wanted to talk about, kind of the different ways that I've experienced it. So I'm going to start with Dungeon Crawl Classic, since this is the one that probably most people are familiar with the funnels. If you're not familiar with it, you should definitely try it. I highly recommend Sailors on the Starless Sea by Harley Stroh. But basically, the concept is you're level 0, so you have a D4 minus your con or stamina in DCC. Hit points, which often means you have like 1. Most characters that I've had in funnels have like 1 or 2 hit points. I'm very, very, very lucky if they have 3 or 4, which generally means that it's a one-hit kill. In DCC, a level 0 character, once they hit 0 hit points, they are dead. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Once they hit level 1, then basically there's a mechanic where they may seem to be dead, but within a round you can, or as many up to their level, you can revive them. Not revive them, but like heal them back up. And then once that time has expired, then it's just a matter of luck whether or not they happen to survive, and they're going to be permanently damaged after that. So it's very lethal. Usually you're going to have you roll in the occupations chart, and it'll say, well, you're a farmer, and so you've got like a scythe. I can't remember exactly what they give you, and maybe like a bag of flour, or maybe you've got like a cow, something like that sounds kind of like goofy to be bringing with you on an adventure, but you end up coming up with some weird ways to make use of it. And that you have usually 4 characters, 3 to 4 characters each player. So the way that that's usually handled, you're not actually going to be, saying, well, this is going to do this. You can do it that way, but it tends to kind of get bogged down a little bit. The way that I usually handle this is basically, hold on, I'm going to check this just because work. I'll get back to him in just a minute. The way that I usually handle this is, and this is the way that it was handled with me whenever I started with DCC, is basically you'll have your 4 character sheets, in front of you, 3 or 4, and it's like, you just put them in a row of like, this one's in the front, this one's in the middle, this one's in the back. And so basically, Anything bad that happens to one of your characters, it's going to be the one in the front. So usually you put the one that has the best rolls, you put that in the back because that's the one you want to live, so that it can be the level 1 adventurer. Um, so that's usually kind of how it plays out. And so you play a cycle of characters. You try and get at least one of them to survive. It's possible that, in fact, very likely, that somebody is going to lose all of their PCs that they have at their disposal. And in which case, through the course of the adventure, there's going to be opportunities where they find backup. You'll usually find some kind of villagers that have been tied up. You might find people that are about to be sacrificed to the gods of some cultish bastards. There's all kinds of different ways that this will play out, and it basically feeds into a constant supply of potential level 0 adventurers until you get to the end. And once you get to the end, by then usually you've accumulated some things. One of the things that I really enjoy about it is that basically through the ones that I've seen, the official ones that I've seen, there is a hefty sense of exploration. There are often traps. There are, it's basically the very archetypal scenario for a D&D adventure, I feel like. And I'm just talking about the published modules. I mean, you can do whatever the hell you want. But regardless, the fact that it is so lethal, that is what kind of necessitates the constant supply of extra characters. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I'm going to contrast that in a second. But so for sailors on the Starless Sea, for instance, there are many creatures to fight. They usually have just like a single hit die. So these level 0s, even though they have like no bonuses and they're kind of using shit equipment, they die super easily. All those kinds of things. Usually it's kind of like a blow for blow thing, like, oh, I took this one out. This one took me out. I took this one out. Everything moves very quickly. And the whole process, it can be done in a single session. And, depending on how you do it, some people will allow like the level up in the middle of the session. I've found that to be kind of, it kind of throws off the pace, in my opinion. And also kind of makes the process a little disjointed. I might opt to allow maybe them to choose one person to level up, but even then, it still kind of does the same thing, and then it becomes a whole deal if that PC ends up dying, and it's I don't know. I kind of like just keeping them at level 0 until they get to the very end. And one of the things that I have experienced that was a lot of fun was basically making it where there's some kind of artifact of a sort. And I say artifact, I don't mean that in the like necessarily powerful magic item that, has some kind of very just insane quality to it, like it's often used. I mean more in the way of there's some kind of like legend. I see, I was almost contradicting myself. It's not necessarily like a legendary thing, but it has kind of like it's something that has a trace of something that is beyond the character and their potential, something that's kind of left behind from somebody else who may have been a level 1 adventurer or something like that. And it's something that kind of imbues this PC that picks this thing up with power that's beyond them. So they get to have a taste of, level 1 power or whatever. So in one of the ones that I played, I basically had it where, I picked up this, what was it? Was it a weapon? No, it was a horn. I think it was a horn. And basically it gave me cleric abilities. There was a cleric that had died on this place, and this was from Michael Curtis's The Chained Coffin, from what I was told. I haven't run it myself, but this was, I was the player. But in any case, a cleric had died. Their possession was, dropped in this very desolate location. My character picked it up. The like deity kind of spoke to me in some way and gave me this divine mission to complete. And I had like a probationary period where I was able to use turn undead and lay on hands and stuff like that. I think I might have had like one or two spells as well. And so it just kind of offered this taste of what is to come in a very neat way. And, you know, it makes things interesting. But I mean, ultimately, what would have happened is if that character would have died, he would have dropped it, somebody else would have grabbed it, and the whole process would repeat itself. And it was neat because by the end of it, see, that character had like, I think maybe like a +1 to personality. And so he was kind of like in the right stat block, as it turned out, to be a cleric or something to that effect. But we were using the crawl zine paladin class as well was an option. I ended up going with that. That's beside the point. But anyway, it's a cool model to use is basically what I'm trying to say. And so, you know, you'll have like a very archetypal adventure with several like weak creatures, several traps, you know, several like hazards to go through. And, you know, it'll culminate in some kind of, you know, massive thing. And there's just no sweat if like, you know, half of the group just gets mutilated. Like in Sailors on the Starless Sea, spoilers, there is a moment where basically you can get absolutely overwhelmed by sheer numbers, for one thing. And it's very likely that there's just a fucking party wipe at that point. You know, you can season to taste. Since that's closer to the end, I usually kind of like make it where there's a little bit more leeway. But then there's, you know, it's like a period before that where there's this this moment where you can just get like completely wrecked by a fucking sea monster. That you have to outsmart, basically, to get it to leave you alone. Actually, that's not necessarily true. It has a provision in there that makes it where after it's killed so many, then it fucks off. But yeah, so they're very, very lethal, but very cool. Okay, so that's the DCC ones. Highly recommend. Give it a shot. Now, 5th edition. So in 5th edition, I had already experienced the DCC funnel. I really loved it. And I wanted to kind of take from that. Here's what I did differently, though. So, for one, because of the fact that people don't typically play 5th edition with a seriously high degrees of lethality, and they often want to portray like an individual character. They don't want to really bounce around with a whole bunch of different characters. Which, you know, I feel like 5th edition is not really... It can be played in that way, but I don't feel like that's kind of what it's meant for necessarily. So I figured instead of, you know, playing against it and trying to, you know, force it into doing something else, I went with something different where basically it's very likely and possible that maybe one PC will die. And then that person can, of course, make a new character. And you would have these other characters that have already gone through an adventure together and they have a strong bond. But it would be very likely that at minimum they would have this really profound experience and maybe have experienced some kind of loss together, something really interesting. So what I did was I created a small village, and they were told, the people making their characters, they were told that they would roll stats as normal, that they would roll a d4 plus con for hit points, so they didn't have a whole lot of hit points, that they would have their basic proficiency bonuses, and that those would apply to something that is well, basically I told them, you know, you can have the skills, you know, specifically skills of your first level class, but not your class abilities. So, you know, you wouldn't have the D8 hit die of or D10. I'm sorry, I'm thinking old school. The D10 hit die of a fighter. You wouldn't have second wind. You wouldn't have a fighting style, all those kinds of things. You would just kind of have the things that kind of lead up to it. So this would be like towards the end of your training in a way. in some capacity, and there would be like a length of time that has transpired after the level 0 adventure has completed. So that was kind of the idea behind it. So they all live in this village. They are foster brothers and sisters. They have the same foster dad. And basically, the beginning was, he is very ill, and, they all are really close to him. And basically, he is an important person in the town, and some people kind of go to him with a problem. And the kids, the foster kids, are kind of asked to look into it. And each of them were given a, well, they weren't given necessarily. I asked them, what would be your role in the community? So, I had one person that's like, well, I'm going to belong to the town guard. I had another person who said that they were going to do this. Another person said they were going to do that. And so they all had kind of like a vocation. So it was kind of, again, kind of representative of what you do in DCC in a way. But this was a little bit more oriented to social dynamics, things like that, to try and ease them into this adventure. So what happened was there was a creature, and honestly, the name is escaping me of what the damn thing is called. I know it starts with an N, and it's this like alien type creature that it inhabits people and controls them. Somebody is going to hear this and they're going to know immediately what I'm talking about, and I'm going to feel ashamed. But in any case, it's a rather weak creature, but it controls people's minds. And I thought that it would be very appropriate because I could use it to slowly, take over the town that they're in. There's kind of like an outbreak of murders and people acting weird and things like that. And then so the framing of the adventure ends up being very much an investigation. And I felt like that was appropriate, and it worked very well. The players were like seriously engaged in it. This wasn't a big group. This was, I want to say 3 players. And, so just 3 PCs, they weren't very strong or anything. But the way that it all played out, they basically found people, acting weird. They took, somebody prisoner. After they they tried to take the first one prisoner, but there was kind of an accident and they fell out of the window and died, and the thing kind of like scampered off, and it got very tense for a while, but they managed to get everything sorted, and by the end of it, the players were like seriously excited about the campaign. Like they could not wait to get to the next session because they're like, we have these characters that, they were weak, they were kind of vulnerable. They were very vulnerable, even more vulnerable than a level 1 character, which a lot of people in 5e, they're like, oh my God, level 1 sucks because you can die so easily. And this was even more significant. And in fact, I think we had a near death. But it didn't quite happen. They really took to it, and even more so, I think, because of the whole sibling thing. And another thing I did, and I'm going to say that I wouldn't do it again, is basically I told them the racial traits don't work, which makes no sense whatsoever. I think at the time I was trying to keep them from having like some of the real weird stuff that you can get from certain race options, but at the same time, because of the fact that it doesn't quite make a whole lot of narrative sense, I would probably take that back. And really, it didn't end up playing that heavily anyway. I'm still fairly new, so like occasionally I try things and, they work out or they don't work out. I learn from them. That was one of the things. I wouldn't do that again. I would just specifically, keep it to you're kind of like half of a class level, more or less, is how I would probably take it. I don't remember if I let the wizardy type use any cantrips. I don't think that I did, but I wouldn't necessarily be 100% against it either. So anyway, that's just stuff to think about. We had a great time with it. It's very easy to do. And it wasn't that hard to get the players on board either. Basically I just had to tell them, hey, we're going to do this thing. Your characters are going to be kind of vulnerable and everything, but by the end of it, you'll have like a shared backstory. So it's going to be like the ultimate Session Zero is basically kind of how I push it. And of course I would still have some, I give them a serious pitch that tells them exactly what they're in for. And that's kind of my replacement for a Session Zero a lot of times, is to just have like individual conversations beforehand and see if there's any issues that might arise. But by the end of it, I mean, they were seriously into the campaign, and we had a really good time with it. So I would highly recommend that you give it a try. And I highly recommend that you give the DCC funnel a try. But that's it for today. I've got to see what these these texts were about. So y'all take it easy and have a wonderful day.